Wait. Let's talk about Invincible season 3 for a second here. Well, many people have said that it's actually better than the previous seasons. It's got sympathetic side stories, higher stakes, greater losses, a strong climax at the end of the season. It also has a lot of criticism. Like, there's too much filler content, there's poor power scaling, there's bad pacing, there's weak animation and production throughout, and there is way too much of Mark just getting beaten up at this stage of the story. But I don't know where I stand, because these compliments and criticisms are not just about overall enjoyment with the story, but they are mostly, I would say, actually about narrative immersion with the story, engagement with the story. And I cannot just go with my gut instinct when it comes to those more complicated, more nuanced concepts and ideas. So I will evaluate and analyze the good and the bad of Invincible season 3 in terms of immersion and somewhat a little bit enjoyment, to determine whether I think that Invincible as a show as a whole has fallen off. And just before I get into it, hi, I'm Inolzia. I use psychology and humor to discuss fiction, and if you like this video, please engage with it so that the YouTube algorithm doesn't toss me aside like a used tampon. Thank you, let's get into it. So the show, spoilers ahead, obviously, I've already seen it, not read it, because I wanted to watch it when it came out, and usually I don't go to the original source material until the adaptation is done. So yeah, it will be a show only perspective from me. If you have any advice or spoilers about the comic, don't you dare tell me. Don't you dare. I will delete the comment, and I will also be very upset. So do not spoil it in the comments for other people. We are only going to be talking up to season 3 of Invincible, the show. Season 3 is about Mark Grayson struggling to grow stronger and repair his relationships with Earth's heroes, with his mother, with his love interest, his girlfriend now, Eve, and his brother. And during this, he faces increasingly terrible threats that really challenge his emotional strength and his physical strength. So if we take that apart, in the beginning, a lot of it's focused on Mark and Ollie, and Mark and Eve, and we get a lot of romance brewing. We get Eve and Mark overcoming their tensions, with the alternate version of Eve confessing to Mark and him trying to explain that he's always felt this way for her, it's genuine, her reciprocating that. Then we also get Debbie with Paul, and Debbie kind of overcoming her hurt with Nolan to go back into a relationship with somebody else. Then we get Ollie and his relationship with morality and his understanding of killing, which is explored a bit later. But yeah, in the very beginning, that's kind of what's going on. Then we get to Cecil. We get more Cecil's perspective as how he became the head of the GDA, the Global Defense Association, I think, and how he comes to these very extreme measures of saving the planet, because he's always kind of had that fight in him when he sacrificed his face for the first time, and he still has the scar because he didn't want the plastic surgeons to get rid of it. Well, we learn all of that stuff from him, and we understand then, or kind of we get a bit more torn then when Mark and Cecil come to a head, and we find that Cecil's afraid of Mark, of course, and that he has these devices, these little things that fuck up Mark's head when he needs to get Mark to stand down. And so they sever their relationship, their bond, which puts everything more onto a stress test, because the team now is kind of split. Like, do we support Mark? Do we not support Mark? What do we do with that? And we focus on even Mark for a bit. We get some of those more detailed stories. We get Mark going to another dimension with, or universe technically, I think, with Immortal heading and ruling the world. He fights that guy, and this happens when he's on a date with Eve, by the way. Then we learn about vulnerable civilians and how they've dealt with the world at large, as well as the wider team, because the Guardians is now split. Then Rey, she also quits as well, or she's thinking about all of that, and she's thinking about getting a life away from that. But more specifically, those villain side stories, we get one with a gay couple who is driven basically to crime because they have no money, they have no way to survive by themselves, and they are then used as Ollie and Mark's training, basically. They also change their outfits. But whatever, not not the point of this summary. Sorry. The and then we also get to learn about another person who was a victim of Nolan's attack on Mark, which in collateral killed a lot of people, and so he blames Mark because I suppose because Omni-Man's not there anymore, and because he doesn't really know what happened, so he's just assuming. And so he kind of at first tries to peacefully get Mark's attention to confront him about his dead, was it sister and cousin, something like that, his dead relatives. But then when he doesn't succeed, he then starts to slowly use his knowledge, because he does work, I think, in GDA or some kind of science facility in there, and so he uses those devices to help him harness energy. And once he can do that, he is able to put up enough of a fuss for the shapeshifter of the Guardians to come and confront him. Then he ends up getting frustrated because it's not invincible, so he uses his own families as hostages. They volunteered, well, the mum volunteered, and she was like, yeah, I'll do it. She probably proposed the idea, she was kind of crazy, and then he ends up killing her by collateral and going to prison, and now he hates Mark. We have that, there, questioning morality, questioning Mark's emotional strength, and then we get the thing with Oliver questioning his physical strength, his morality. He ends up killing the twins because they attacked Mark, and we get this. Ollie, is he, what is his stance on violence, and why is he so involved in this stuff? We're questioning this, we're worrying about this throughout the story, and then we start to come closer and closer until we get to more of the climaxes of the story. The team is solidly splitting. I think Kate and Immortal even leave. We get a lot of things like Mark and Eve having a little contracting company together so that they can be hired and work at prisons because they're not working with Cecil anymore. We get the rise of Machine Head again because of that. Paul escaping was all related to that. And then we finally come to a climax, I suppose, a double episode climax, I would call it, where the first episode, so I think episode 7 or something, is with multiple dimensions. Langstrom from season 2, end of season 2, you think he's dead, he should be dead really, but they didn't kill him, kind of. I mean, he shouldn't be dead. He got fixed up in an alternate dimension, whatever. But like, I don't know. Anyways, you thought he was dead. He's not dead. Langstrom is back alive, and he has now brought a bunch of other universes' Marks to wreak havoc. So on that prison, where they're contracted to protect, Mark is having to go there. They destroy other places. Debbie knew they would come to the house that they live in, of course, so she went into hiding, successfully safe, but still the Marks are wreaking havoc everywhere else. Heroes come out of the wazoo to help. Some people I didn't even realize were that strong come out, and they're just there. I'm like, damn, I guess it really isn't just the Guardians, huh? And then they help. Mark and Eve get wounded quite a bit fighting against them, and while these evil Invincible variants wreak havoc on the world, Rex blows. Do you get it? do you get it? I was actually sad though about that, but we move on. Unfortunately, we have a funeral and we move on very quickly, actually. Like very quickly, because the next episode we get to meet Conquest, who is this Viltrumite, who is like Mark's final test. I feel like they've done this like 5 times, but anyways, Mark's final test, and they fight. It's violent. Ollie gets involved, almost gets pulled in half. Mark stops him. It's a horrible battle until Eve, who is knocked unconscious, and she uses her, that if you guys watch the OVA, not OVA, what's it called? The special. Don't watch too much anime. The special, she had this power where she's able to unlock the limitations she usually has on her powers. She's able to stop Conquest and basically burn off his skin, kind of, or burn off a lot of him, and then Mark deals the finishing blows. He beats him into the ground, basically. And then so this time is similar to how last season ended, but it shows Mark and Eve this time, so not just Mark, pounding some enemy to the ground and then lying and acknowledging what they've done. But this time, Eve is there, and Mark is nowhere near as upset about it. Between this, Alan and Nolan on the Viltrumite prison overcome the execution by fighting against the Viltrumites, freeing inmates, and getting Battle Beast's help, which says a lot for the future of the show. Throughout, Earth mourns its dead. Smaller side stories of criminals and how they're driven to committing crime is explored. Fractured alliances form, and hidden powers like the technicians, Russ, and Damien Darkblood, begin positioning themselves for what's to come, while Mark vows to protect his family and those he holds dear, no matter the cost. So yeah, there's a lot that happened this season, but that's just the precursor to what we really want to talk about, which is whether this is the sign that Invincible has fallen off. Well, to know that, I first need to talk about the good. So the good, I'm going to be using narrative immersion to talk about this, and if you don't know what narrative immersion is, it's just a theory, a concept to explain our engagement with fictional media, and it can be split into two halves: transportation and identification. And I'm going to be using those two halves and all the little items that can be put underneath. The first aspect of the season that really makes it immersive, really makes it enjoyable to consume, is the amount of time they spend on character development. I'm only going to talk about my favorites because there are so many characters that get development that we would be here all day if I didn't at least find a way to narrow it down. Starting with Mark. Mark, for one, finds himself becoming a better older brother. In the beginning, especially when he first met Ollie, he's kind of unsure. He's not really okay with what's going on in the first place, how he gets confronted with it in the first place. But you see really in season 3 where he starts to take responsibility of being this kind of mentor figure to his brother. He struggles a lot. But even though I wouldn't say he's finished his arc, I suppose, on being a good big brother, because, you know, the things that happen to Ollie under Mark's watch, or the way that Ollie acts under Mark's watch. But Mark definitely develops and starts to understand his brother more. You know, he sees him playing, he sees him doing other things, and he really just starts to learn how to accept that somebody is how they are. This is something Debbie already knows, evidently, with the way she talks to Ollie in the back garden and everything. Like, she knows how to accept people for who they are, especially family, and to just adjust to that. And Mark at first was trying to be controlling in his right, but later on he learns, okay, I'm gonna have to just accept that he's gonna follow me, and I don't want him to do that, so I can only protect him as best as I can when he does. And that's the development, I would say, for Mark's role as an older brother. Then we have him becoming more independent from Cecil. It was a long time coming, and it was good for his character, especially the way that Cecil was treating him with the weapons that he used against him, which were basically unprompted and out of fear, I suppose, for Mark's aggression, which is, you know, debatable. We'll talk about that at a different point. But the way that happened was a slight against him, was a violation of trust, and for Mark, that was the tipping point of their already shaky relationship to make him decide to be independent from Cecil. And that was development that helped Mark to run his own company with Eve and find a way to work that's not school and not volunteering at the soup kitchen, because really Mark hasn't had an occupation, so this was his occupation now, and he was his own boss. And for Mark, that felt like a necessary step, or at least an experience that he needed to have. Next development was dating Eve. You know, we had a different relationship with Mark for a while. We had Amber until season 2, really, and now we got that confession with Eve, so we were ready to move on with that. And Mark was especially ready to really start to confront his feelings for Eve that he felt from the very beginning when he first saw her and got, I don't want to get distracted. What's the word that could be the least offensive? Sidetracked, distracted, awed by Amber instead. I think that's a polite way of putting it. I don't know why I'm yeah, anyways, and that development really is good for him because he really needed somebody who he didn't think would die at the drop of a hat and would be able to protect themselves and protect him, actually. And so him being able to confront his feelings and develop them and nourish them by being with her, she's accepted him into her life in that way, has really kind of brought a comfort to him throughout this season. Then there's the development of Mark acknowledging his fault in certain tragedies. You know, we get the whole side stories and all the people who have been affected by what happened with Nolan and Mark, mostly obviously Nolan's fault. I mean, 99% Nolan's fault for the tragedies, but he, you know, Mark still feels responsible for what happened, especially when someone's yelling at you, Invincible, you're the one who, you know, killed my family. Like, Mark starts to feel those kind of that guilt, and so he is forced to confront it when that guy is confronting him with it, and you see how he starts to feel it sad and depressed and things like that about it. And so that kind of development, which you would have thought that would have happened much earlier on in the show, because this is the climax of season 1 we're talking about. Why are we still talking about that now? But to me, it really showed that Mark was distancing himself emotionally from that, and he was not really letting himself feel that much of the tragedy after the period right after. He kind of pushed it aside, and all of a sudden he's being confronted with it again, and he's really starting to feel it this time. He's really seeing the funeral for the first time of all the people who have died during that event. And so yeah, that confrontation is a change in him. It's a development in his character that was also very good. And the last character development that happens for Mark, which is almost the most important one, is that he understands and he validates himself killing. I mean, with Langstrom, he's literally panicking. He's like, oh my god, you would have killed me, you would have killed my family, you would have killed everyone. He's panicking completely. With this death, there is no panic at all. He is actually almost seeing relief when he has finished executing Conquest with Eve out of self-defense, but still killing Conquest with Eve. And that development really is important for his character, because he's really been struggling with this morality and these problems and everything. I'm sure it's similar to killing Langstrom, because that was self-defense, right? And he would have killed Langstrom, honestly, if he hadn't escaped, probably, because the way he ripped off Langstrom's arm, he was definitely ready to do the blows. So it just shows, those last 2 episodes especially of season 3 showed that Mark has now accepted that sometimes he will kill, and he will not anymore feel guilty about that. Phew, okay, so Mark's character development is, of course, the biggest character development we have in the story. He is the main character, but there's also a few other people. We have Eve. So of course we have Eve dating Mark and her development with that. She's obviously been harboring a crush for him for a while, but was respectfully kind of keeping her distance after breaking up with Rex, and that has obviously helped her build more confidence, have more comfort, similar things. Then we also have her uniquely resolving and reconciling with her parents at the very end. You see them coming to meet her, and her confronting them as well in her house, saying, I will not do this so that I can stay, and you have to respect me, stuff like that. And that is important for her character. It means that she is no longer, you know, living in tree houses anymore. She can be with her family. And so even though she comes up with the company and she has this company with Mark, she is not completely independent. She is still living at home. So very similarly, they mirror each other almost, because before Eve was completely independent, Mark was completely dependent, but now they are both kind of in the middle. And so that is a good development for her as well. It kind of helps them to be close and to understand each other better. So I do like that. She goes to university, which is another great development for Eve's character. It's just more of her studying, more of her learning about architecture, so she doesn't make the same mistakes she made in season 2, where she made a playground and it fell apart, stuff like that. And then we also have her finally unleashing her powers and saying that she's got more experience with it. Maybe she'll be able to control it better, and who knows what her potential is. She is honestly the most interesting in terms of power in this show for me. So this is really fun to see what the height of her powers really is, and how much she can slowly get towards that and towards controlling that as an adult. Then we have Oliver becoming a lot of things. You know, he becomes a boy. You know, he makes friends and he goes outside and socializes more. He becomes a fighter. He is a sidekick now to Mark, or I guess a partner, also like a trainee, a mentee to Mark, and he is defending his family all the time now. Then he's a killer, and he kills the twins so that he can, I guess, protect the people around him and himself from their wrath. And that is a lot of significant development for Ollie, who was a very young child before. The Guardians was another big thing. So I'm not going to talk about all of them individually, but the Guardians as a whole, you know, them separating, that's huge development for all of the characters involved. In fact, that their romantic relationships deepen throughout. Immortal proposes to Kate, I swear, and all of their relationships just change. So we get Rex and we get Ray and we get Rudy and we get Monster Girl. They're all together. Amanda, I think her name is. And just a bunch of more relationships developing into something deeper, and them making the sacrifices necessary to, I guess, prioritize what they think is most important. So especially Ray quitting, that's very big development on her part to get into the Guardians and to leave because of her own injuries and her own worries. We get Cecil. Cecil doesn't develop that much, I wouldn't argue, but we do have him at the end deciding that, okay, I have gone to the ends of the earth to stop these people. I now have conquest because he's not dead. Apparently he's not dead, just by, you know, he just escaped death, just like that. And I'm now gonna go all the way. So for me personally, I didn't think he was gonna do something like that at the very beginning. You know, I think that even Cecil would have had some kind of restraint in that sense, but given the fact that Conquest revealed that they have less Veltramites, and because Conquest even came in the first place and we saw how Mark fared against him, I think that was actually development on Cecil's part, that he actually didn't plan to do something like that, but the fact that the stakes almost increased in those last two episodes showed him that he really had no ways of staying alive if he didn't use the Veltramites as well. And lastly, Debbie and Nolan's characters both developed in the same way. They developed to accept help from Alan and Paul respectively. So that was one high, you know, the character developments that really did make this show immersive. But there's another thing that made this show immersive. There's actually two more things before I go on to talking about what made it not immersive. The second thing that made this show immersive was the solid motifs and themes that were shown throughout the whole show. And those motifs and themes were trust, sacrifice, and family. Well, what do I mean by trust? Well, of course, Cecil breaking his trust with Mark is a huge big deal for the plot and for the characters. We had Cecil needing his staff to trust him in the flashback and with Donald the whole time. The team breaking up because they can't trust him, and the repercussions of that loss of trust that rippled throughout the entire story. Then we have family. Of course, there's the normal, natural, you know, Ollie and Mark and Debbie, all of that nonsense, and Eve and her family. But what I think is actually even more interesting in the terms of family and in terms of what it brought to the story is how the alternate versions of Mark's relationships with their families actually physically shaped the characters themselves. You saw how the one Mark who actually still loved his mom really did have more mercy in his heart and really didn't want to be as violent in certain ways, and the Mark who killed his dad was much more violent. Then we have sacrifice. You know, we had a lot of sacrifice throughout this season. Of course, the teams, you know, we have the found family aspect of those teams, but more specifically, we have Rex and Ray. Ray not willing to sacrifice herself for the job, and Rex literally sacrificing himself for the job. Friendships, you know, Donald and Cecil. Donald willing to sacrifice himself for Cecil. We have Ollie always willing to sacrifice himself for Mark and constantly basically throws himself onto the front line for Mark and sometimes for others as well. It just shows how everyone really had to make fatal sacrifices for the people that they cared about and for the job basically that they are committed to doing. Then the last type before we start talking about the lows is the sympathetic side stories. They show us other perspectives of the same universe we've seen for 3 seasons. They expand on other people's point of views and really do show us that the heroes don't care about the why, just the what when villains are making a fuss. We have the gay couple who felt forced because of financial instability to rob a bank and were indiscriminately beaten down basically by Ollie and Mark during a training session. And that's something that we never would have thought about if we hadn't seen their backstory. Then we have Scott Duvall, who lost his family during Mark and Nolan's beatdown of Mark, and his growing insanity in terms of how do I get Invincible to admit it, how do I get Invincible to pay, stuff like that, which really isn't accurate or very smart or very, reasonable, because of course I understand wanting to talk to Mark, but wanting to fight against him and all of that really did show that certain things like not being able to communicate with a hero because they don't have, I don't know, if an email or something really can throw people off the edge, and honestly kind of showed me more so the GDA's lack of fan communications or like HR criticisms, which I guess just never got through. And when he lost his family, of course, it showed me how a man can be driven to further madness through his own faults. So yeah, season 3 is immersive. It has great character arcs, it has great themes, and it has great side stories. But how immersive can it be when it's simultaneously lacking in other ways? That's you don't have to answer. I'm gonna answer. I'm gonna answer that. I'm gonna answer it. Stop! So the lows of Invincible season 3. I've done a few reviews before, and a lot of the time I focused on more so what it was missing, just because I feel like everybody usually knows what a show has. But based off of the feedback from those videos, I realized that a lot of people did not appreciate a viewpoint that focused only on one side of the spectrum, hence this video was born. And with that in mind, now that I've said all the good things, let me dog on it, because I really I wanted to. I've been holding back. So this season was good, but it had many faults, starting off with the fact that the main plot was disregarded. I mean, all of the interesting events and the conflicts had nothing to do with the overarching plot, and that really, in comparison to the other seasons, held it back, at least to me. Circling back to what I just spoke about with the gay couple and with Scott, both of these stories, both of these touching vulnerable moments and vulnerable side plots where we challenge our viewpoint, were simply just there at the end of it for a main character's development. With the gay couple, it was clearly for Oliver's development, you know, all of that thing that they had to do, everything that they sacrificed so that they could be financially stable, even though it never really worked, was just completely discarded because Oliver needed a training session. And then we had the Scott, you know, the guy who became the supervillain kind of so that he could get justice, or just like his version of justice, because still, you know, Mark isn't at fault, but his version of justice, it was all just to make Mark feel a little bad, because Mark knows that he wasn't the person who killed the family members. Really, he knows that. All he really was shown to feel was slight, I don't know, it's like guilt, it's like sadness, and then the next thing happened and he moved on from it. So really, those two side stories ended up being for naught in the wider scheme of things. The early turning point of the series with Cecil and Mark's argument and Cecil's violation of trust was good. You know, we're circling back to the themes, the highs of the show, but it had no impact, no real impact on the plot, especially since no matter what they argued about, the threat of Veltrum coming to Earth was so overwhelming, is so overwhelming still, that no matter what, they would have had to work together again anyway. And in the end of the season, they literally did go back to working together. So it had no meaningful impact on any of the overarching story that was carrying season 2 and season 1 especially forward. Talking about the Veltrumites, Oliver versus, you know, the twins learning how to fight and learning how to kill throughout was all interesting for his personal development, but really when we saw him confronted with Conquest, we found out that he had no chance and he would have no real impact against the Veltrumites, like, at all. So what was the point of him being slightly stronger on Earth when there are barely any threats of Earth origin that mean anything? And Langstrom doesn't count because he's literally using Veltrumites. So, like, what was the point? Talking about Langstrom, there were so many side villains I could not care about. Not just the ones I mentioned 1,000 times already in this video, but also the dragon guy, the Asian guy who helped Machine Head get his footing, and him dying, and that's supposed to mean something. Why? Like, yeah, he's super strong and maybe he will have an impact, but it did nothing to really accelerate anything. I guess it just gave us another pawn to use, but Cecil didn't capture him, so I guess he's another player in this fight that we will be seeing at the end. I'm assuming a war or something, I don't know, just a show watcher, but like, what was the point of that whole prison arc, literally? Short battles with randoms are fine, good even. My problem is just when there's too many. Mark versus the other Marks. The other Marks as villains were very interesting on the surface, except nothing changed with them visiting Earth. They still got sent away hating Mark and being loyal to Viltrum. So, what were they there for? Just an introduction? So we know there are other Marks, but we knew that because we saw that in the previous season with Langstrom going to different dimensions. So if they're gonna just be the exact same as they were before, what was the point? Like, literally, what was the point of them being there? Because nothing changed. So, and then the romance. I said family, trust, sacrifice. Romance falls in all of those, to be fair. The abundance of romantic relationships in this season was more than it had been before. Like, more. And not to say that romance has to have a significant impact on the plot, because it doesn't usually, but it was still pointless, you know. It was still kind of meaningless, because really Eve and Mark would have fought together anyway. They didn't have to date for that to change anything, really. And then we have, you know, Ray and Rex, like Rudy and Amanda, like Immortal and Kate, the most annoying pair of people in this show. And just like what Debbie and Paul, like, none of the romantic couples had enough emotional weight for me to actually care. Even Mark and Eve didn't have enough. It felt empty, you know? Like, the chemistry was not, you know, giving me excitement of thinking, okay, like, this is a really important, crucial relationship, really cute relationship I can root for, that will tie people together and help with different alliances. It doesn't have to have a significant impact. Let me just say that again. It doesn't have to, but it didn't have any impact, like, at all, basically, on anything. Everything would have panned out the exact same if the relationships didn't happen at all and there was no changes in the relationships. Like, everything would have been the same, except I guess Debbie would have to find a different place to hide out. But like, what? Of course she would have a different place. She would go to Cecil or something, I don't know. So that was the first low of the season. that really did take away from the overall immersion that I was experiencing while watching this show and my general enjoyment. The second low out of three is something I haven't really spoken about so much in this video that I'm gonna go into now, and it's about the outside world that was built up in season 2, explained and explored in season 2, was completely abandoned in season 3. And I mean, Jesus Christ, there's like 1 or 2 scenes maximum that even touch the surface of what is going on outside of Earth in season 3. Viltrum, the Viltrumite Empire, the most important. We did not get a follow-up on what was happening with the Viltrumite Empire, their army. We didn't get much of a history lesson, any understanding about their powers, their culture, except from the one little tidbit we did get at the end by Conquest, kind of saying that, hey, the army's not as big as it seems to be. It's quite limited. We keep killing people. We keep killing each other. Gasp, our numbers are lowering. Like, that was the only thing we learned. And really, I mean, we learned a little bit when we were with Alan and Nolan, to be fair, but like nothing really, like in the grand scheme of what season 2 showed us, nothing. Okay. And so that was disappointing, because it wasn't like what happened on Earth was so important throughout that it needed all of the attention and it couldn't be condensed. Hell, there are like 3 episodes I'm pretty sure we can just scrap because they had no bearing on the plot and they had no true bearing on personal development that was necessary for the characters to be fleshed out. We still could have gotten that fleshed out feeling without, like, I don't know, 3 hours worth of runtime. Then there's the Coalition, because I'm sorry, are we not gonna talk about the Coalition? Where were they? Like, we have no update on what they're doing, no updates on what's going on. We could have even with Langstrom, when he went to the little place to get healed the second time, or even the first time, with the robots or the AIs, whatever they are, okay, those beings, we could have had something adjacent to them talking about it. The Coalition, maybe they're in association with the Coalition, they're like planning to help the Coalition, or they're fighting against it, or there was some big incident that was off screen and people were speaking about it was on the TV in outer space or whatever. Like, anything, bro. Like, we could have gotten some update on what the Coalition of Planets was doing during this time. We got none. Okay, then there are the other factions that we really would love to know about. Hopefully season 4 will show us that. We have Cecil and Donald, which is great, but we always had them and it's the same. We did get the addition of Dark Blood at the end of the season, which was good, but it was at the very end of the season. Should have happened midway. We should have got a few scenes later on during the season. Don't know why they chose only the end. Again, the plot on Earth was nothing important. It could have been condensed so we could have moved on. I don't care about the adaptation. I don't care about what happened in the comics. Oh my god, because in nausea, it's because we had to wait for this arc in the future of the comics. I have no clue. Don't know. Don't care. That could have been brought forward, okay? It could have been brought forward, because whatever we saw there was a bunch of non-plot relevant scenes that did not add basically anything to the characters and the plot we already knew. We've already experienced what Immortal is and how he lives, and we've experienced about Kate. We learned about her brother. We learned about Cecil. Like, after these things, we don't need any more, bro. I'm gonna tweak. The literal outside world away from Earth, and even just not literal, talking about Dark Blood, the outside forces, the other factions, those things could have been explored more, and I don't know why they weren't. And I guarantee, even when I see season 4 in hindsight, it won't save me from still thinking that was a miss. That was a low of season 3. Last but not least, the last low that really grinded my gears, that made me almost question how much it could be immersive if this was a drawback, is the emotional engagement. There were some tear jerking moments. I'm not gonna say there weren't, but this is not enough for me to put it in a high. In fact, it was so little, I would put it in a low. The sub stories were misplaced. They should have been put in the appropriate point of the timeline. After what had happened, they should have been there to deal with it then, so we can still feel that. I don't care about narratively, we wait so long because just like Mark, we forgot what happened, and so now we have to be confronted. No, shut up, okay? Narratively, it would have been better if you put it nearer the actual event. At this point, I was like, damn, I forgot that even happened. Gosh. Like, no, it's not that. It's no. Stuff with Kate and Invincible and her brother are not sub stories. They're just wastes of time. So I'm not even going to mention those as sub stories. The relationships, I touched upon the fact that they made me feel empty, but with emotional engagement, I really want to emphasize that it wasn't just because I didn't really ship them, but because there wasn't tension, because they didn't add this kind of build up and this kind of pull. You know, a lot of it was short lived and quite immediately self gratifying, like Rex and Ray, like Eve. I mean, I wouldn't say Eve and Mark. It kind of felt like that because it was almost like a restart after Amber when Eve from another dimensional universe confessed. Then it kind of felt like we were restarting Mark and Eve's romantic journey after Amber. So I do kind of feel like it was short-lived, to be honest. Like, I feel like there was a need for a build-up of tension, and all of the couples in this show did not have any tension, didn't have any, real big pull, any moments that I was like, oh my god, that's so cute. Like, nothing of that, which I think is lacking for romance, of course. The only ones that I would say really did have a longer, long-standing build was Rudy and Amanda, but they had very minimal scenes together, so I was like, I mean, I've never really shipped them, but even if I did, I would still be unsatisfied. And then there was Immortal and Kate, but they are pains in everyone's asses this season. Ain't nobody shipped them anymore. Ain't nobody ship them anymore. Come on now. No one does. No. And then the last real big part where you'd think there would be emotions, you'd think it would make you feel emotionally engaged, but it really didn't, is Rex's death. Hold on. Okay, hold on. I love Rex. I really do. In the very beginning, I thought he was an asshole. I thought he was so over the top, so annoying. And I grew to love him pretty quickly after like 4 episodes where you start to understand that it was a bit different. He was funny though, but God, he was irritating. And then, you kind of, he grows on you. He grows on you, right? So I was, when I saw, oh my God, he exploded. I was devastated. I was upset. I was like, what the hell? What the fuck? He was just got with Ray. Oh my God. But that funeral scene, oh, it was ass, bro. It lasted like 5 seconds. And then Mark and Eve had a kind of a little cute moment, like, oh, I'm sad about him, I'm guilty about him as well, but I have you now. Yeah, I have you. Boom, there's another problem now. It was like just like the sub stories, like used for their development, not for anything else. It just made me feel like there was no reason for him to die there. What, to show that the marks are dangerous? We knew that. Why not let Rex continue his character arc with Ray? It was fine. I mean, I get that he was good. He probably should have died with the Lizard League. I get that. So I'm not upset he died, because I mean, at that point I was like, oh, he's dead. But that would have been a better death, is what I'm saying. Like, that would have been a better death. This feels like, what? Why? Like, why? Like, because there was so many of them, I can't even be upset with the one that killed him or that died in the crossfire, because like, am I supposed to be more upset with Langstrom? Am I supposed to be more upset with, I'm just upset with the writers, if anything. Like, it felt meaningless. Like, it felt meaningless. It honestly just felt disrespectful to his character that they did that. So we've seen the highs, we've seen the lows, and I need to weigh these both up really to make my decision. The highs being the character development, being the themes and the motifs, and being the side stories. The bad was the lack of plot progression, world building, and emotional engagement. Kind of probably sounds to you that I really hated this season, but I didn't. I think there was definitely good aspects of it, but there were also negatives, and that needs to be factored in. I really tried to be more, I don't want to say objective, but like more, cold, more clinical when I assessed what the narrative immersion score should be for this show and where I put it, because I mean that's the point of the video. So what did I give it out of 10 in terms of narrative immersion? Mostly a little bit of enjoyment though. 7.5 out of 10. Yeah, it's lower than I would rate season 2, definitely lower than I would rate season 1, but I think it's definitely still on the positive side. Now the final question: do I think that Invincible season 3 has fallen off, and why? The short answer is no, because it is narratively immersive enough to be a solid piece of media, a solid experience that I think anybody could enjoy if they've obviously watched season 1 and season 2, because that would be insane if you jumped in at season 3. Anyways, the long answer is that later seasons of shows tend to struggle to be as good and whole and strong in terms of plots and characters in comparison to previous ones. And that's not an excuse, that's a reality. When you've finished with origin stories, there's nothing new. You have to keep people going, keep people intrigued in what is going to happen next, have an overarching story that people will watch nonsense so that they can get to that story. So sometimes the middle seasons tend to just build on certain things that aren't necessarily related to the story, but because of the previous seasons you still watch it and you still process it so that you can get to the plot. There are clearly ways that I think it could have succeeded at being interesting while focusing on the plot, while developing characters. I've said this, the little changes they could have made or the big changes they could have made in terms of cutting things and replacing things, that I really do think would have made this like a more perfect season. But I don't think the season was bad enough for it to be critiqued as something awful. Who knows, there might be an arc in the future that explains why they chose to have this more slower, character-driven season after such a highly intense previous season. Maybe it's the calm before the storm. Who knows? All I know for now is that Invincible the show hasn't fallen off yet. It's just temporarily probably changed its focus. But what do you think? If you like this video, then subscribe. Check out my other videos down below and let me know if you agree or you disagree in the comments so we can have a chat about it. And let me know if you like this well-detailed review with positives and negatives so I can choose to do this or not in the future. And say a quick goodbye. Jan. Yeah, I actually, okay, listen, I know narratively it's pretty good this season and I know that it had meaning, but personally even though I love character development, I did not really enjoy the season that much, I will say. Which is why, I'm really trying to be true to what is narrative immersion, because narratively is good. I rated it 7.5. Emotionally, I probably rated it like a 6, because I just, it was boring, dude. Like, the pacing was all over the place, and I agree with what people said about animation and stuff, and even though the characters were good, I feel like, what was the point? Like, I don't think it took me through a journey. Like, even season 2 had its faults, but this was like the most pointless. This was like the most mean, rude. Like, I feel like I've been insulted by this season, because in 10 years time when I rewatch Invincible, I am not rewatching this season. I can tell you this now. Season 4 better bang. I'm excited, hoping. I haven't seen anything. I don't want to see anything in the comments, but hopefully season 4 will bang, because then I can just forget this season, except from certain things like Cecil, learning about Cecil, because spoilers, he is probably one of my favorite characters. Even though he's really awful with Mark in the season in the beginning, I just love his vibe. I'm a very pragmatic, hence I love Batman. I love characters that focus on logic and sacrificing things, and not necessarily being the good guy, but having good intentions or having good in you, just being a good person, but like corrupted as well because of what you feel you need to do. I just love that. So I know I shouldn't agree with him. I still don't agree with what he did. Like, obviously it's violation of trust. If I was Mark, and I don't think that he should have confronted him like that and been attacking, but to have the devices to stop Mark, absolutely, obviously you'd need it to protect yourself, but he shouldn't have used it. That was so over the top. I was like, Cecil, what are you doing? But using Conquest, and at the end I was like, listen, if they're gonna come, let's at least try everything. We're gonna die anyways, I may as well try. I'm just on the side about that. I know not everyone agrees with that, I know, but so learning about him was great. Learning about Ollie, I'm just ranting too much, but yeah, I enjoyed the season. Just was bored. Yeah, was uninterested in a lot of what was happening, which takes down my enjoyment, but not necessarily the immersion because I still think it was immersive. Yeah. Janyong, stop looking at me.